As part of Filmtastic February, being hosted by Annie's Obscure Book Adventures, I decided to read the autobiography of Tom Baker, The Best Doctor Who. This book, unlike the memoirs of some actors, is more about Baker's life as a whole, rather than a detailed, behind-the-scenes look at the projects he's done. It starts with his childhood in Liverpool, and goes into the late 1990s, when the book is published. If you're only picking this up to read about his time as Doctor Who, you're in for a bit of a wait. The early goings of the book focus on his childhood with its working-class poverty made worse by World War II, prolonged rationing, and the insularity of their community and the stultifying religion. Nonetheless, Baker finds himself attracted to the Catholic Church because it's clean and orderly. He spends his teenage years preparing for a life in a religious order, only to be on the verge of a nervous breakdown and lose his faith, given the strictness and inhumanity of the calling that he can't square with the actual beliefs of the faith. Quitting the church, he joins the Royal Army Medical Corps, learning to be a nurse and effectively re-socializing after spending so many years in a kind of isolation. He also discovers joy for himself, and that he can bring it to others in skits and performance. When his time in the Corps comes to an end, he feels directionless, working odd jobs, doing small parts on stage, and getting married. His wife's family, however, is wealthy, and his father-in-law makes Baker feel owned. When his father-in-law has a debilitating stroke, only Baker, with his nurse training, is willing to endure caring for the man and his hostile attitude. Following his father-in-law's death, though, the family treats him like a servant until he snaps and tells them off. The divorce, however, also estranges him from his 2 children. Trying to find meaning and happiness in his life, Baker decides to become a full-time professional actor, working first in tiny theaters until he caught the attention of Laurence Olivier, who brought him into the Royal National Theatre. His time there also made him a few contacts that got him work on television and in a few movies like Nicholas and Alexandra and The Golden Voyage of Sinbad. Depressed and still unable to support himself through acting alone, Baker works in construction, losing himself in the job until he writes a letter to the BBC looking for any television role. It just so happens that one of his old stage directors knew they were casting a new lead for Doctor Who and suggested him for the role. Baker impresses the show's producers in a meeting and goes from working on a construction site to being the lead in one of the world's most famous television shows almost overnight. His time as Doctor Who isn't recounted with a lot of granularity, but, like all of the book, is filtered through his thoughts and impressions of what he was doing at the time. The main takeaway is that he loved the role and disappeared into it. He explains that, having felt like an outsider his whole life, it was easy to take the part of an alien wanderer and, by his own admission, became possessive of the role. It felt so natural to him. Similarly, he was a hero for children and had the adoration and acceptance he'd often felt missing in his life. He played the Doctor from 1974 to 1981, the longest and among the most successful runs for any actor in the role. However, his disagreements with producer John Nathan Turner eventually led to him exiting the series. His return to the stage doesn't fulfill him, though, and Baker becomes depressed, spending much of his time drinking with artists and actors, until he realizes he doesn't want to live in London anymore. Nothing positive is going to come from his current way of living, so he starts doing voice work and other lower-profile television shows for the BBC, marries for a 3rd time, and moves into a renovated schoolhouse in Kent. If this autobiography has a theme, it's that Baker has spent much of his life searching for his own identity. It's right there in the title, more or less. He struggled for decades trying to find out who he is through different avenues such as religion, public service and his career. That is a through line I think many people can relate to. As someone who grew up watching Tom Baker as Doctor Who, it was surprising to read about him having so much self-doubt and plagued by a sense of never feeling close to anyone for much of his life. Not just in the show, where he played the Doctor as a good-natured trickster with wit and off-kilter charm, but also in many of his public appearances and interviews, he always came across as an affable person with a wry sense of humor. As he explains in the book, the rehearsals and being in front of a crowd or on camera is always where he felt the most at ease. For him, the performance was the good part that he knew how to do. It was actually living his life and feeling comfortable with himself that was the bigger challenge. If nothing else, this book is often funny, sometimes darkly so. You'll know this right away when in the first chapter he explains his first ambition in life was to be an orphan. Baker is witty and has a chaotic sense of humor. He has undoubtedly exaggerated some aspects and explains that the way he remembers some parts of his life might look different to other people, but it's never to the point of being unbelievable. Primarily, this book is more for people interested in Tom Baker specifically, or in any reader wanting to follow someone's unorthodox path into acting and worldwide stardom. More general fans of Doctor Who, especially classic Who, might also appreciate this autobiography, but that part of his life is not the main focus of the book. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my peculiar notions. If you enjoy this channel and want to support it, you know what to do. You can also take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to another YouTube creator you enjoy, because those are the actions that prevent the Daleks in control of the YouTube algorithm from exterminating worthwhile videos. If you're interested in seeing more looks into fiction and non-fiction related to movies, check out the playlist for Filmtastic February put together by Annie at Obscure Book Adventures. Until next time, watch some Doctor Who, live, and be well.